Hey guys, here with me I have Dewet, old friend of mine. He has worked in law enforcement for many years. He mainly does anti-poaching, and anti-rhino poaching and abalone, I believe.
I've worked. A lot of our work has been with anti-rhino poaching, but I've worked in everything from anti-gold poaching to deep sea, and also abalone is the one which is quite rough with regards to gangsterism and potential violence on the street kind of scenarios. Yeah.
You know, it was actually funny when you said you were doing this anti-abalone poaching, because when you said abalone, I'm just thinking to myself, what the hell's abalone? Because I'm English, you're more Afrikaans than me, and I'm just thinking, oh, nee man, it's this Balamoon.
Balamoon, yeah.
And my parents stay in Pearly Beach, where there's a lot of that poaching, the Gordons Bay area. I'm pretty sure you're very familiar with that area and with a lot of the poaching that goes on there. So the vet's been doing some jiu-jitsu classes with me, and you are, I believe, a Kala instructor?
Yeah, I'm a Kala instructor as well.
So in terms of cross-training, how beneficial is it to cross-train these different styles? Because you've done boxing, Muay Thai as well.
Yeah, so I've been in heavy kind of situations on the street where it's kind of life and death, and you're severely outnumbered, and the scenarios can differ from day to day and incident to incident greatly. The one day you're in the water, you're halfway in the water, the next day you're on dry land, you're on uneven land, the next incident is during nighttime hours, and it looks completely different again. So it's very unpredictable. You're not always on flat surfaces, you're not always up against one opponent. Sometimes you're severely outnumbered. Sometimes you're up against a weapon that you didn't expect to be up against. So the situations vary. So I always look at it like this. If you're a construction worker and you rock up to a building site and you've got one tool in your toolbox, you're not going to be able to do much. If you get there with a toolbox with 250 tools inside the toolbox, you're going to be able to attack way more of your jobs on site. And it's the same with us, specifically around law enforcement. The scenarios change very quickly. The environment is sometimes not the same between two incidents. So the more tools you have in your toolkit, the better when you have to dynamically and on the fly select a certain tool for the condition. So cross-training, there's no ways, if you're going to really be efficient at grappling on the street and making arrests, which in law enforcement you have to do. You can't run away, you have to engage. There's no ways you're going to be successful just knowing one style or one art. It's just not going to work. You need to cross-train boxing, jiu-jitsu, even judo, I would say, wrestling, Kala, all these things I would incorporate into training.
But you said that you have to engage, you have to grapple, you have to make the arrest, right? Is the arrest a priority, or when is it a threat enough that you actually have to use a weapon?
Yeah, so if somebody breaks the law and you are the law enforcement officer, you have to engage and make the arrest. It's not like a self-defense civilian situation where you just need to survive and get away. As law enforcement officer, the scenario has to end in you making that arrest. So now the big challenge we struggle with, which is very different from military, is that we don't have the same authority to use lethal force. So even though we carry small arms, we do carry everything from pistols, hand weapons to AK-47s, Galils, AR-15s, whatever. It's quite normal for us to have this in our toolkit. we cannot shoot to kill at 100, 200, 300, 400 meters. We have to basically put a hand on the opponent and finalize in an arrest. So what very, very often happens is that we can't pull the weapon because the suspect isn't making a direct and immediate life-threatening attack on our life yet. So we get within range, and obviously if I haven't drawn my pistol from here, if he grabs my pistol arm or my pistol, now I'm engaged in clinching and in grappling. And the question is, can I now pull my firearm and shoot? The answer, it's a gray area, and some would say yes, some would say no. The repercussions of even once he's gone for my firearm hand and now he's holding on to it, even if I was to break free from here and I shot him, there'd be a year, 2-year legal court case after that, which would impact my ability to do my job and put a lot of stress on me. So we don't actually want to end up in that scenario, and that's why as law enforcement you have to be able to clinch, grapple, you have to be able to transition to a knife because a knife is seen as a less lethal form of violence, and also it's used to protect your hot weapon, which may be on your dominant side. So if you can't clinch, if you can't wrestle, if you can't grapple, you're in for a very, very big surprise the first time you engage with a criminal that does not want to be arrested. And quite often these guys are on meth or whatever. I've seen scenarios, obviously we study law enforcement professionals, and I've seen scenarios where they're trying to use a dog on a guy and the dog is not well trained, the canine. And you're looking at this mess that's busy happening and you're like, why doesn't that guy just engage in grappling? Like this, you can see the criminal doesn't have any kind of hand-to-hand combat experience. You could have very, very easily diffused the situation without having the canine bite, potentially sever an artery or something. So if the officer knows jiu-jitsu or wrestling or judo or something like that, it changes the game completely. And not only that, it increases the level of confidence of the officer to such a degree where they're capable of making more arrests with less damage to the suspect. And that's the end goal. You want to do minimum damage to the suspect. So to answer your question, I can't even draw this pistol on me right now and point it at you. Even if you were threatening my space, coming closer and closer into my space, I still can't draw and point it at you because you're not making a direct threat on my life. So by the time you're close enough to grab my arm, I still am not legally really allowed to pull my pistol.
So you would only legally allowed to pull your pistol if I pointed a firearm at you?
If you point a firearm or you grab a knife and you threateningly hold that knife and look like, without reasonable doubt, like you're going to perform an immediate attack on me, I can draw. But if you're picking up a rock and threatening me with a rock, no, I'm not allowed to draw my firearm if I can get away. If I'm stuck in a vehicle and my vehicle is stuck, or I'm stuck in a small space and I can't get out, and you pelt me with a rock, that's a different scenario. Then the court may accept the fact that I drew a firearm in self-defense. But if I can run, I have to run. But that's where the problem resides. If you're an officer, if you work in law enforcement, you can't actually run, but you're still kind of governed by that rule set. So it makes it very technical. So the short of the long is, if you cannot grapple, if you cannot perform a takedown, if you cannot control somebody's arms or protect your weapons, you're in for a very, very big surprise. And the odds are, if you're working in the right industry where you're dealing with gangsters on a daily basis, your weapon is going to be taken from you. And I've seen this many, many times where situations boil up and boil over, and the poorly trained men are a massive liability to you, because you're carrying weapons like AK-47s, like AR-15s, dash prods, these kind of things. And
those things are sought out amongst gangsters.
Yeah,
they'll try and take it from you.
Exactly. You've got 30 rounds, 60 rounds with you, maybe double up on mags or whatever. So if that guy gets that weapon, he opens up. I mean, your colleagues, everybody there is
danger.
Is toast, yeah, and they may use that firearm against the next group. Also, it's just incredibly embarrassing to the unit, to your unit, and then it creates a dangerous scenario for your unit because going forward, the other gangsters are going to attempt to do that as well. So, in today's day and age, if you're going to see violence on the street and you have to make arrests, there's no ways you cannot train as a minimum something like jiu-jitsu. I mean, the reality is you actually have to cross-train into several different arts, and I can explain why, but even something like boxing transitions well into knife work. And like I said before, if you're dealing with gangsterism or you're working in the wilderness where there's syndicates that are very, very physical. Remember, these guys are illegal gold miners are fit. Poachers, wildlife poachers are fit. Abalone guys, they're fit. They're doing physical work every single day, like
and they're probably hyped up on drugs to begin with.
Hyped up on crystal meth. If you're engaging with these guys and you cannot clinch or grapple or engage in a cold weapon and a hot weapon, you're going to struggle. I mean, and also the major thing is what you see guys struggle with is confidence. So you can have a brilliant wildlife tracker like the Sun guys. We work with the Sun guys quite regularly. So this guy is a brilliant tracker, brilliant, the best. But he lacks the confidence to engage in that final part of the process where you have to grapple, clinch, make the arrest. So there he lacks the confidence. So even though he can get you to the suspect, he can't finalize the arrest.
So with my experience in pro wrestling, you need charisma and you need intensity to come across well for the crowd to actually believe it. So if you don't have that confidence, that charisma to show that, hey, you know your stuff, you're in trouble now, they're going to pick up that nervousness and they're going to see that lack of confidence and they're going to know, I can take this guy's weapon. And I mean, they do it once, then they're going to do it again and they're going to know how to pinpoint these guys, right? So that puts you guys in more danger.
Absolutely. We had guys selling syndicates standing in front of us and explaining to each other how easily they would take our weapons from us. And we'd be face to face with those guys every single day. And again, like I said, I can't just pull a weapon if I feel intimidated and point it at you, because nowadays guys have smartphones on them. So they'll record you and wait for you to pull that weapon in error, and then they'll post that and make a case against you to disable you and take you out of your unit so you can't do your work.
So the law is more against you than the criminals.
The law is very restrictive towards the enforcement officer. So
yeah, because you don't have the same you don't have the same privileges as the police force or as military and so on.
Exactly. You in the private sector, which a lot of South African are, we employ in the private sector more than the military and the police combined. So our work that we do in the wilderness areas, it is a type of law enforcement mixed with military. You wear camouflage, you have expert trackers, you're the best, probably the best in the world in tracking. We handle canines for scent detection, for tracking, and then we weapons trained as well. So in a sense, we've actually taken over military, what used to be military work, and we now do that in the private sector. And the advantage is that we're more professional, bang for your buck wise, we're more professional. The downside is we don't have that default protection from the government, the long arm of the government. So we have to build relationships with law enforcement in terms of governmental entities like the Hawks and the police service and these kind of units, and having a strong relationship with them does give you some protection, but
you can't screw up.
again, you have to be better trained, and because you cannot just simply shoot somebody and get away with it. There's a long interrogation process afterwards. Not interrogation, but a sort of investigative process afterwards. So again, it comes back to if you can grapple and you can subdue 1, 2, 3, 4 guys without using a cold weapon or a hot weapon, it's just much better for you. And again, getting back to the confidence, you're going to do it more if your confidence is higher. So your success rate goes up and your failure rate goes down.
Competence builds confidence, confidence builds competence at the end of the day. So tell me, you said now that something like boxing helps with the knife work,
Yeah.
right? But now, in terms of that, now, like without the knife work, how often do you actually strike a criminal, or you try to avoid that completely? Because
So,
you said you have to make the arrest, you have to put a hand on making that engagement. Like, when is it acceptable to actually strike them, because that can be potentially dangerous and play against you? And then also, like, if they try to strike at you, are you allowed to pull out a knife? Are you allowed to pull out a gun? Does it have to be equivalent force? What is what makes you determine what is the appropriate action at the end of the day?
So it's very, very difficult, because you have the law, like the strict law, which governs you, and then you have the scenario, and then you have the adrenaline and just the dynamic nature of these scenarios, where you have to read the scenario and you have to act accordingly. And it's better to make a tiny mistake and ask for forgiveness, but you survive, than doing the opposite. So it's very, very complex if you end up in violent scenarios, especially where you're outnumbered. So the law says you're allowed to use minimum force to subdue your opponent and to arrest your opponent. So so you are allowed to use force, but it has to be the minimum amount to overcome your opponent. So obviously, like the scenarios I've been in scenarios where there's 2 of us up against a syndicate of 40, 50 guys during the night. In the wilderness, you lose radio contact, so you don't have backup. You're 30 minutes away from backup anyway. You're an hour and a half from police backup. So you're in a very, very dangerous, you're by yourself, and you're going to run into a massive group of guys, and you're going to confiscate, you're going to cost them 700,000 rands in the next 5 minutes. You're going to cost them that amount in money, and it's a big group of guys. So they're not going to be too keen on letting go of that money, number one. Number two, that they don't want to go to prison. Number three, they know they've got the numerical advantage, and they know you can't really shoot them. So you're in a dangerous situation. So there, again, you have to read the situation, and you have to decide, because quite often when you initiate, we would use concealment, we use tracking, we conceal ourselves, we use camouflage, we don't use lights at night, so we can get really, really close, within meters sometimes, 1-2 meters of the guys, before we spring the trap. And we use sometimes thermals, and then we hide ourselves, and we track, and we know where they're going to come out, whatever, so we're very, very close. So when you spring that trap, quite often, depending on what other equipment you have available, if you have blank firearms, you may fire off a bunch of rounds. Long story, but you don't want to fire real rounds around sophisticated criminals in public areas. But you may use a weapon to scare them so they run, and then obviously you grab the evidence and whichever of the suspects you can, because 2 guys obviously can't catch 50 guys, right? So in that scenario, you read the situation. So if they turn and they fight, you have to start engaging in more than just fists and feet. or teep kicks. You know, now you're going to have to
fire rounds.
You're going to have to pull cold weapons and potentially hot weapons as well. So the question is, at that point again, it's a grey area, because did they pose a real threat to you? So that's what makes it so incredibly difficult, and it's almost an impossible question to answer because it depends on the situation. So I've been in situations, for example, where it's, again, same scenario, it's black of night, there's a little bit of moon, maybe 40% moon. We're ambushing a syndicate. I end up just, my partner was far away. I was on my own right next to the syndicate where they were busy getting ready to load the product, and my partner made a mistake. He made an error and he quickly put on a flashlight like far away, so the guys got spooked. I had no choice, I had to go for it. So I jumped in the middle of the syndicate, and I grabbed the one guy on his arm. I've got a galil on my back, I've got a pistol strapped to my thigh, and I've got a knife, a push dagger strapped to my bulletproof. So I grab the guy, and the guy starts hitting me with like a steel tube. They use it for lifting abalone. He starts hitting me across the arm that I've got him grabbed with. So now I push the guy into the water, and we start going into the water. It's only moonlight. There's another 6-7 guys around us. So now we're busy, and I take my flashlight and I start smashing the guy over the head. He's smashing me on my arm with this steel, chucking tool. It's a sharp tool, it's a heavy tool, and he's smashing my hand with it. So now I let go of this. I don't want to I can't pull my pistol yet and shoot him. Right? So
it's not that level of threat yet.
No, so I'm grappling. I'm waiting for the guy to hit me on the head. Once he hits me on the head, now I can say legally, we're in the water, he's attempting to kill me, right? So now I can draw. He ended up never hitting me on my head, so I let the guy, I had to let him go because he was busy basically breaking my hand. So I made the decision to let him go. Actually, my push dagger as well, in that scuffle, it came out of the Kydex sheath. And it was a cold steel push dagger. So it was a SafeMaker, I think, SafeMaker 2, which is a high quality sheath and push dagger that actually came out. So if I had to go for my cold weapon, that would have been at the bottom of the sea. But luckily, if he went for my head, I could have drawn either my sidearm. I would have probably drawn my sidearm, and then I could have shot him. But again, now you shoot a guy for this level of crime. Yeah, and he's acting from self-defense, so it's not the greatest scenario. There's been other scenarios where guys have tried to kill me, and in that scenario I could have drawn and shot. But again, if I can use a cold weapon, rather use the cold weapon, and
just makes you look better in the eyes of the law at the end of the day.
In the eyes of the law, and you're not killing the guy.
You make the arrest, and then, I mean, you make one arrest that leads to more arrests down the line, right?
Exactly.
Essentially, that's the reward that you're looking for.
Exactly, and you have to remember also, it's not black and white. You don't really want to kill a criminal that's part of a syndicate, because it's a syndicate. You're not killing the whole syndicate. Like you're creating a problem for yourself.
You're getting rid of an expendable, basically.
And you're creating
more guys higher up that you need to get to.
And you're creating bad blood. Now you killed one out of a big group. That group is not just going to go away. It's going to continue existing. Now you've got this history with this group.
Now it's going to be revenge.
Now it's potentially revenge, and I've been part of that as well. And actually, you don't want it to get there. So if you, and now that scenario that I went through, I've went through similar scenarios where, so that was one of my early introductions to this kind of crime fighting. And later on, I went through similar scenarios, but I started changing my game up. I started experimenting with different types of martial arts. And different techniques, and so you learn from every single incident. You learn what works, what doesn't work, and exactly why it's good to have a portfolio or a toolkit with a bunch of different tools so you can just select the right tool for the job. I also believe in something bigger, and I don't think I'd be alive if it wasn't for that, but yeah, I do believe it helps to be prepared, and yeah, you've got to have a diverse set of tools. It's not just going to be one tool that works for everything.
Oh, jeez. Dewet, you gave quite a bit of information in this video now. So I think we'll end it off there, because we're just going to get to that point where we're just talking about different scenarios. I think you've mentioned enough to actually help explain what you have to do legally required in order to actually use force, and you've mentioned now what you need out of the training and how it rewards you. So I think with that, with everything that you just said now, I think now we can we've reached the end of this video, so stay tuned and like and subscribe. There's going to be a part 2 where Dewet's going to show us some techniques that he's learned over the years and some that he has actually used. Cool.